I got a message on Facebook that terrible morning on the 7th of October from a friend living near Hota Sharon.
In the center of the country.
Yeah. And she was writing, I'm running to the shelter in my pink pajamas. And I turned on the Israeli television because I can understand some Hebrew. Terrorists driving around in Sderot. And I was here also in Israel last Christmas holiday. And I actually visited Sderot. And I visited the Black Arrow Monument. I went to Pagish Gol to play disc golf because I'm a disc golf player. And Pagish Gol has the only 18-hole disc golf course in the whole Middle East.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Almost nobody knows about it, but and then I went all the way down to a monument I forgot the name of. It's very close to the Egyptian border.
Yeah.
And then I took the road up, passing Nirim
and the kibbutz Nirim on the Gaza border was one of those first kibbutzim that was attacked and savagely dealt with.
Yeah. And so I spent the whole day in the Gaza envelope in the proximity to Gaza, and it was a beautiful area.
Yeah.
I should have been visiting one there in Nirim, but unfortunately she was not able. We tried to plan it, but she had some family business to do. And on that terrible 7th of October, I got messages from her. She was sitting inside her mamad, like
in her security room.
In a security room,
which is a precast, concrete, reinforced room in the house with a heavy metal door and a heavy metal on the window.
Yeah, and she was sitting there for 8 hours. She could hear the terrorists in the kibbutz.
Wow!
And she was rescued by IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, after about 7-8 hours. And they were taking out, and she's still evacuated. She's been in a Eilat for a long period, and I think she's still there.
Yeah.
And now they are told they will be moving to Beersheba in some apartments. So they move all members from the same kibbutz together, more or less.
It's like here in my kibbutz and the kibbutz over the road. We've taken in the whole community of kibbutz Gvaram, 150 people here, and I would imagine about the same number over the road in Givat Chaim Yichud. So tell me, like everybody, I'm sure, with the outbreak of the war and this invasion of, it's very hard to, how to describe these people apart from animals and everything else who came over into the kibbutzim and killed indiscriminately. How did the population in Denmark react to the attack, and how are they reacting now, which is already nearly 3 months later?
Yes, nearly 3 months later. In the beginning, of course, there was a lot of videos from the attacks.
Yes.
They didn't manage to get all the Hamas cameras yet. And there was a lot of disturbances about how could it happen and everything. So there was quite a coverage in the first day. I knew immediately this is going to be a war, and it's going to be a long war, and it's going to be until there's no more Hamas.
So we went into Gaza with land forces, boots on the ground, and people all over the world were seeing images of utter devastation in Gaza, terrible situation, and it's not something that we wanted to do. We reacted and we realized that we had to defend ourselves and to get rid of Hamas as a terrorist threat. And when people see these images now, and I will tell you, my heart goes out to the people in Gaza, to the civilians, to the families, to the children. I understand exactly how they are suffering, and we didn't want this to happen. So now you still have this ongoing war, and what can I say? How do people now see it in Denmark? And let's talk about the protests that are going on in the streets in Europe. And what's actually happening on the streets in Denmark now?
The streets in Denmark now are full of people screaming, "Free Palestine."
Free Palestine.
From the river to the sea.
Yes.
Jihad, jihad.
Yes.
And we are not talking a few hundreds, we are talking maybe 20, 30,000 people at the same demonstrations. I live in a little town on the west coast of Denmark, and they have now every Saturday around 300 people demonstrating in black clothes, Palestinian flags, screaming "Free Palestine" from the river to the sea. And
so that's even in a small town.
yeah.
And there are hundreds of people out on the streets. Now, who are these people? Are they immigrant Muslims or local people, or a combination?
It's a combination. I would say it's like half immigrants, Muslims, primarily from Palestinian refugees from Lebanon, coming from the camps in the 90s, and their children, etc. And then there's also a lot of immigrants from Syria due to the Syrian war. I think we got around 15,000 Syrian refugees in Denmark.
Yeah.
And we also have a lot of people from Afghanistan, because we were participated in the war in Afghanistan for many years. You also have a lot of refugees coming from Iraq. They're not all Muslims, because we also have a lot of Christian refugees from Iraq, because the Christians in Iraq has a very hard time. Even from Iran, we have refugees, Christian.
Well, the war both in Iraq and in Syria, I mean, it was going on. In a way, it's still going on, but it's a sideshow. The news media are not looking at what's happening there.
And I would say the other half of the demonstrators, they are Danish people. They are usually from the left wing.
Ah, yes.
Sometimes I laugh a little bit when you see Queers for Palestine.
Of
because
this is a complete paradox.
And
if these homosexuals and lesbians and anybody else went into any Arab country, not just Gaza. I mean, in Gaza, they would be thrown off the roofs.
Yeah. And many of them are left-wingers. Many of them couldn't point out Gaza on a map.
Yep.
And they have these, I've been in a lot of discussions on Facebook groups and trying to tell the story and say Gaza is actually, it's not Palestine that was occupied in 1967. It was actually Egyptian administration. And Jordan was actually...
That's right.
Jordan we are just like 7 kilometers from the West Bank. That was Jordan territory, not only occupied, it was annexed by Jordan.
That's right.
Jordanian passport and everything.
Both Gaza and the West Bank. Gaza was, in a way, annexed by Egypt, West Bank by Jordan for 19 years until 1967.
Yeah. So many don't know the history.
Yeah.
They hear the slogans, Israel occupied Palestine.
So what is it that motivates, I'm not talking about the Muslim immigrants, but what is it that motivates local Danish people to join in these demonstrations?
That's a very good question, because they are not able to answer it. Sometimes they say, why didn't you go in demonstrations when 500,000 Muslims was killed in Syria?
That's right.
They don't know 500,000
And
people.
4 to 5 million were refugees from Syria.
Yeah, and talking about Yemen, they don't know there's a war in Yemen.
Yeah.
And hundreds of thousands getting killed in Yemen as well.
That's right.
And they don't know the story. They know the headliners.
And the slogans.
The slogans. And trying to, I would not say educate, but learning a little bit of the history. It's a difficult task, and I had unfortunately was forced to, I would say, to unfriend a lot of people on my Facebook because I cannot stand these Free Palestine videos all the time.
Well, yes, well, you know, I think back in history, you mentioned they don't know the history. I go back even further to the Second World War, when it was the King of Denmark who initiated the rescue of Jews and ferried them across the sound to Sweden to escape from the Nazis. So there was always a strong feeling in history and even all the years through until the present of Danes supporting Jews against anti-Semitism and Danes thereby extending that friendship and support to Israel. So I'm trying to understand why those local people in Denmark go out to chant slogans that they don't understand at all. From the river to the sea, they don't know what river, they don't know what sea, they don't know what they're talking about.
And you see so many YouTube videos at the moment from asking what river, and they don't know what river.
And if they saw the river in Europe, it wouldn't even be given a name. It's so small, the River Jordan.
No, it would never be called a river.
Yeah,
that's more like a creek at the moment. And it's true. There was a huge rescue operation in Denmark in the Second World War.
Yes.
At that time, there was around 7,000 Jews living in Denmark, and around 100 of them died in the concentration camps.
Yes.
Rest of them was taken to Sweden, or by an agreement, Danish Red Cross with the Germans, they were sent to Theresienstadt near Prague.
Yes.
And around 4 or 5 weeks before the end of the war, the Danish Red Cross organized a volunteering trip by trucks going to Theresienstadt and rescuing more than 400 Danish Jews taken back to Denmark.
I didn't know that.
On one side, you had the Allied forces. On the other side, you had the Russians. And this pathway just in the middle of Germany, where it was still German controlled.
So it was a humanitarian corridor.
Yeah, there was not a corridor, but they made this deal with these German officers in Theresienstadt to allow them to bring back. And there was a Swedish diplomat as well.
Raoul Wallenberg
was also in this discussion.
Yeah.
So they were allowed to bring back the Danish Jews to Denmark.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And that was a very risky operation because you were driving in the middle of a war.
That's right.
And the Allied forces was not able to see that, of course, Red Crosses on the roofs of the cars, etc. But it was a very daring trip to rescue the Jews back to Denmark. So in Yad Vashem,
the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem.
I was there last winter, and I've been there many times before. And I was there in a lecture for English-speaking future immigrants to Israel during my Ulpan. And I was sitting there in a room at Yad Vashem, and we were like maybe 15 people. And then came a guy to me and afterward and asked, "Are you German?" Because I could look a little German. Yeah. I said, "No, I'm not German." "Are you Dutch?" "No, I'm not Dutch, I'm Danish." And then he gave me his hand and said, "Thank you. Thank you to what you did, your country, during the Second World War."
It's amazing. I mean, that feeling of being part of a nation that rescued people from the Holocaust. My goodness.
But today it's probably many of the left wings don't know the story. Some know it, but they're not too much into it. And of course, a lot of people at home have asked me, "Why are you going to Israel
now?" During the war.
And I planned this trip already in August for 4 weeks. And I said, why not? why should I not go? Because there's a war and all the stuff and take care, etc. And I said, I have an app on my phone. They will warn me if there's a silence.
A rocket attack or anything, yes.
And there was actually already last Tuesday when I was in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
I was sitting and having a office talk with some company in Norway, and I had to say, sorry, I have to break. I have to go and cover. I was sitting by the river. And Thursday as well, sitting at the beach, moved my office down there in 22 degrees and working on the beach because I can work from abroad. And there was, you could hear the booms. There was around 30 high booms.
The rockets from Gaza that came overhead and then were intercepted by the Iron Dome defense system.
And of course but it's safe. It's right now I'm staying in.
Well, I want to let you into a secret. It wasn't completely safe because when the rockets are intercepted, fragments fall down and drop.
That's why I have some Danish friends, which are Israelis actually, and they also told me the week before I went here, remember to stay in the building for at least 5 minutes before the fragment.
10 minutes.
Or 10 minutes, because fragment is coming down.
Yes, yeah.
And everybody just went into a concrete building. First day in a stairwell, and my Airbnb host in Tel Aviv, he says, you must be the only tourist in Tel Aviv these days.
Well, now at this stage in the war, on day 83, already foreign airlines have started renewing flights to Israel. Not massive, but you came over on Lufthansa.
No.
No?
Lufthansa is not starting up until January the 8th.
Oh, I see. So which airline did you come on?
I changed to El Al.
Okay.
Which is the only airline traveling to Israel.
At the moment?
At the moment, Israel Air, El Al, and one more Israel.
Okay. I heard there were one or two other minor airlines that are coming. I see.
I just saw the other day in the newspaper that Norwegian, Delta, American, and many other airlines, they will not be flying until around 1st of April.
I see.
And it's a massive disaster for tourism.
Of course.
And I was in Jerusalem on Christmas Eve, actually. I was also there last year on Christmas Eve. And there was nobody this year. Shops are almost closed.
Let me ask you, when you told your friends in Denmark you were coming to Israel now, what was their reaction?
They were saying, you're crazy. You're crazy. I said, it's safe. There are sirens.
Yes.
You have an app.
Yeah.
You will have time to get cover. Of course, I cannot travel to the Gaza envelope area or up north, which I planned, so it will be 3 weeks until.
You see, here in Givat Chaim Muchad, in the northern part of the center of the country, we've had no sirens, and it's really a whole large zone of serenity here. And in one way, we're living in two worlds. It's quiet here, and yet all of the war and the destruction and the fighting is going on in Gaza, as well as firing going on up north on the Lebanese border. And we feel the impact both by the evacuees, somewhere in the region of 150 or 200,000 evacuees from the north and the south, and, of course, every day funerals of our soldiers. I see. So,
and the Danish media, they have not been telling the story that about 120,000 people from the Gaza envelope are evacuated to other places in Israel. And they don't tell the story about 60,000 around that from the northern part of Israel also are evacuated to other parts.
Yes.
And we see a lot of course, terrible pictures from Gaza. Children getting killed, civilians getting killed. They never mention, IDF says that's about 8,000 combatants killed. They are counted in the 20,000 civilians. So at the moment, I can understand many Danish people have this is a war where you're just carpet bombing Gaza.
Yeah. It's very hard to project, not to project, but to explain an image of what really is happening abroad, because people just do not know the facts, and it's a volatile situation, changing from hour to hour. Yes.
And so it's not the easiest region in the world to understand the history of.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to the Romans, the Byzantines, the Arabs. They have been here. Everybody has been here.
Well, obviously, you know a lot, having been here and understanding what the situation is.
And when I arrived in Ben Gurion, which is the airport near Tel Aviv,
mm-hmm.
the passport officer, a young woman, looked to me and said, "What is your purpose?"
By the way, was she blonde?
No, she was not blonde.
Okay, because one of the blonde girls is Michal, who is... I interviewed her brother the last but one episode. Okay.
And she asked me when I stand there, you don't get your passport stamped, you get it in a little slip. And she asked me, what are your purpose for your visit? I said, I'm going here for a holiday. And she looked me in the eyes and said, do you know the situation we are in right now? I said, I'm fully aware. And I planned this a long time ago. And of course, I will be here.
Wow.
But of course, it's a very different situation. I stay in Tel Aviv for more than a week now, and I've been.
No, it was a message that came in.
Oh, and there was this Hostage Square, which is a place near the museum where many volunteers help for the families and relatives of those who are still hostages in Gaza, which is.
That is such a terrible dilemma and painful period for Israel, to think that we are trying to eliminate the terrorists in Gaza who are holding more than 100 hostages.
And I was there last Thursday evening. Mm-hmm. And I happened to hear a short lecture from one of the fathers who actually was on the phone and got stories from his son and his daughter-in-law and his two grandchildren while the attack was happening. And in the end, they rounded up the men of this kibbutz and took them to Gaza. They don't know if they're alive, they don't know where they are. And he was very good at explaining the feelings. And he said, on one side, he was very sad that day because his son was kidnapped. On the other side, he was very happy that the daughter-in-law and his two grandchildren was left in the kibbutz and alive. And it's a very emotional place going there on the square because there are so many terrible things on the square, stories, monuments, and I got messages from home saying that Israel is divided in two. I said, no, that was before the war. Israel has never been more united than as now.
That's so true. All sides, left, right, centre, have come together with a national unity feeling. Yeah. That we're all in the same boat and we have to get rid of the terrorists and we have to bring back the hostages. Israel is such, as you know, Israel is such a small country. Everybody knows each other.
And to those living in Denmark seeing this video, Israel is about the size of Jutland in Danish, which is half the size. So Jutland is more or less the same size as Israel.
I didn't realize that. I didn't even think about it. Yes.
In Jutland, there lives around 2 million people.
Yes.
More or less. In Israel, there's around 9.5 million.
Yeah.
And half of the area is desert. So people is living very close here. When I was a volunteer here in 85, there was around 4.5 million people living in Israel. Today it's around 9.5 million. And
about 2 million Arabs, mainly Muslims, Christians, and then Circassians, Circassians and Druze.
Yeah.
But more than 7 million Jewish population. And I've talked with my Muslim friend, who's half an hour from here, and we have agreed that we're all in the same boat here. Both Jews and Arabs who are Israeli citizens under threat from extreme Arab Hamas fanatics.
And it's the same when I see different videos on YouTube and Facebook, and the support for the Israeli Arabs is growing. More and more people are also volunteering to the army of Arabs in Israel.
That's right, yes.
And the last poll I saw from the West Bank, which is Palestinian area, control area, there was 74% supporting the 7 October attack, which is terrible. Which is terrible.
The Palestinian Authority under Mohammed Abbas, 3/4 of them were happy, celebrating and jubilant about the 7th of October attack.
And I actually, when I was in high school, which was even before my kibbutz time, I did what do we call exam. I studied the Israel and the occupied territories for my primary exam at the high school, and so it's my story go way back, and it's
that reminds me. It's exactly the same as me. At the age of 19, I applied to Durham University to study economics and Arabic. I knew I was going to come and live in Israel, and I wanted to be part and understand the Middle East, but I wasn't accepted to the course. It was a brand new course because it was only for immigrants coming into England. So unfortunately, I didn't do that course. If I hadn't done that course and known Arabic, who knows where I would have reached when I came to Israel.
And the media in Denmark, especially the some medias, they described Israel as an apartheid regime.
Well, apartheid, they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
There are stories about in Israel, Jews and Arabs cannot go with the same buses.
Yeah.
This is untrue, because all buses have signs in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. And
as I said in one video, they don't sit at the back of the bus, they drive the buses.
They drive the buses, they go in the buses, they go in the trains. Of course, in Jerusalem, you feel it more because there's a huge Arab population in Jerusalem. Last year, I was also here in Israel. I was sitting in Dizengoff Square, New Year Eve, together with 2 Arabs celebrating, or just being a feeling. Not because it's not a huge the Jewish New Year in September, but there's a special feeling on Kikar Dizengoff in the center of Tel Aviv, and counting down to the New Year, and they could freely move. And in Denmark, they think they cannot vote, they cannot go to parliament.
Well, the problem is they mix up their terminology. They think discrimination, so they think apartheid. Apartheid is a legal term, and there is no apartheid whatsoever inside of Israel with the 2 million Arab Muslim citizens.
And you see more and more videos on YouTube and Facebook and everywhere of Israeli Arabs trying to explain, we want to be here.
Yes.
I saw an interview with an Israeli Arab. She now lives in the United States.
Do you remember his name?
No, it was a woman. I don't remember.
Yes.
And she said, I grew up in a school in the north of Israel, in Galilee, near Nahariya. And she said, even in the school, the teachers started in the Arab school to talk about being what you call it in Arabic, when you go suicide bombing and so on.
A shahid.
A shahid. And she said even that time when she was 13, they started teaching being a shahid. And she said, no, I will not. And she said, now she's...
And it was in an Israeli school?
It was an Israeli school, yeah.
I see.
But an Arab school. And she said, no, that should not be talking about this. And she now lives, and she was saying in a long interview, Israel is not an apartheid. Because she had, when she was going to study at university.
So she studied in a Jewish and an Israeli university?
Yeah, Friedrichsburg University. And she said, it's the other way around. Because when you're coming from an Arab school, studying at university, your degree to get in was lowered in order to get around 20% of the students from the Arab community in Israel.
That's right. So the Israeli government and Department of Education encouraged Arab students, even with a background of perhaps sometimes not exactly a 100% Hebrew speaker or writer, so they were given more time in the exams of the entry qualifications for university.
Exactly. But these stories is too complicated to get into the media. That there's no apartheid in Israel. There's, of course, discrimination.
Oh, there's discrimination in every country.
There's also in Denmark, there's discriminations. When you're having an Arabic name and want to get a job.
Yeah. So let's go into that for a moment. Discrimination of Arab immigrants in Denmark. What is the general feeling of native Denmark citizens about Arab Muslim immigrants?
The general feeling is that they are more or less fully accepted. They are, especially those who came from Syria. They came from a war.
Of course, they lost everything.
They came to Denmark. They were like 15, 16 years old. They had to learn Danish. And then they went on to high school. And actually, some of those students having the maximum score in high school after 4 years being in Denmark.
After only 4 years.
And so they are very fluent in Danish. They are getting good jobs. They get good studies, especially the women. Especially the women.
So they didn't have those rights back home as female citizens of whatever country, Arab country they came from.
And you see in the 90s in Denmark, we get a lot of refugees from Bosnia, the Yugoslavian war.
Yes.
There was around 22,000 Bosnian Muslims who came to Denmark. And today, 25 years later, around, they have a higher percentage of being in job than similar Danish people from the same generation. Not the elderly ones, because they were marked by the war, but the younger ones studied, learned Danish, and they are on the same level of being employed. And they are fully integrated, and they're actually doing quite well in the schooling system, good jobs, doctors, physicians, many jobs.
So do any of these long-term, highly educated Muslim immigrants to Denmark who are now Danish citizens?
Some of them are.
Okay. Has there been any noticeable participation by these people in the anti-Israel demonstrations?
Not the most educated.
I see.
But you of course have people who also study at universities.
Yeah. Well, they have their feelings and their emotions.
But it's primarily those who came with a Palestinian background.
I see.
Because they are feeling different, of course. But generally speaking, it's not Muslims. Because the Bosnian Muslims, they are Europeans.
Yes.
They don't look Arab.
Yes.
They are Muslims, and they don't practice religion on the same level.
Yeah.
But they are Muslims, and they pray, and some go to mosque, and they celebrate Ramadan and Eid and all the other ones. And I know many Bosnians in Denmark, and also been to their Eids, etc. But especially people coming from the Arab Muslim countries having a harder time. But they are also less integrated usually. And unfortunately, especially the Palestinians are less educated and for somehow also less people in job. People coming from Afghanistan as Muslim refugees. Actually, the Dane of the Year a few years ago was an Afghan refugee who's now a professional football player.
Okay, that's
She is playing
Well,
on the national team in Denmark, and she is educated as a doctor at hospitals. And she became the Dane of the Year.
Wow. You know, sport is one of these uniting factors worldwide, whether it's football or whatever sport.
So
I would look forward to the day where one day Jews, Israeli citizens, could play football against a Palestinian team. I mean, there are Israeli Arab football clubs which compete in the National League in Israel. But who knows, one day maybe Israelis and Palestinians can actually play together in a sport.
And the other day I saw disturbing news that Iceland will not participate in the European Music Grand Prix, here in May. Because if Israel is competing, the artistic people of Iceland will not compete. And this is so sad.
This is a part of the misunderstanding that creates a boycott.
Yeah. So the situation in Denmark is difficult now. We having, especially the Jewish organizations in Denmark, having a hard time. Just a few weeks ago, the Danish army was put into service to guard the synagogue in Copenhagen, to guard the Jewish schools, to guard Jewish organizations. And since the terror attack in Copenhagen in 2015, where a guard in front of the synagogue was killed during the terror attack, there has been around 20 police officers dedicated to work at the synagogue.
Wow.
In the middle of Copenhagen, in Denmark, because of the threats of terrorism.
Wow,
And,
my goodness.
And our rabbi, Yair Melcher, which is actually has also been living in Israel, and he's the grandchild of another rabbi who was very famous in Denmark. And he's now going out. He was attacked on the way to a television interview with his kippah and so on. But he's now working together with an imam in Denmark, Navid, and they're going out to schools to educate, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Jew, and we are best friends.
Yeah. Well, you see, it can happen. But sadly, the extremists on both sides of this issue, they are a driving force for an impossible situation without any solution.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll finish the interview here.
Thank you for having me here.
No, really, I mean, you have told me things that I didn't know about.
And to the viewers, it's a beautiful day here in Givat. It's like 22 degrees, it's sunny, and I look forward to the next 2 weeks in Israel.
My goodness. You know, I haven't even asked you what you do in Denmark, and you know, this is the first time we've met. What is your work in Denmark?
I have a company where we develop software solutions to, or online solutions to occupational health and safety. People getting the right protection when they're using chemicals, they get the right legal registration. So we digitalized it in the last 15 years, I think we worked with it. And I'm manager of the company. And I would say in that company, I have I will call it like an Israeli attitude.
Because
which is like we having open discussions. We having, of course, I said the vision is we have to do this. We have to translate it into Romanian. And they said, how can we translate the system into Romanian? They said, because there are so many Romanians working in Denmark. So I tried to set where we were going, and then I let them discuss different solutions and bring us in that direction. And that's just read a book about Israeli business culture, and that's actually a book how to deal with Israeli companies having another culture.
mm-hmm.
They are not arguing, they're not confronting, they're just like in Denmark. I do the conversation, when I'm finished, the other one.
Mm-hmm.
The Israeli culture is more or less we interrupt and create, but we're not fighting. We're just
cross-fertilize.
Yeah.
I understand.
So that's what I do in Denmark.
Okay, well, Carsten, it's been a very, very interesting talk that we've had.
Yeah, same to you.
And when I upload this video to YouTube, you'll become a major superstar on YouTube. And I hope that too many people don't bother you after that. But on the other hand, I would like you to share this episode with your friends and tell people about the reality of Israel and what's happening in this war as it goes on from day to day. And hopefully it won't last too long, although we do know that it's going to take a lot of time to find a way through this situation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All the best.